Good evening. My name is Jerry Shallow, President and CEO of the Rio Rancho Chamber, and we are excited that you guys have joined us today. We have a wonderful panel here that is going to talk about the upcoming legislature. This is something that the Chamber and the Observer partner with annually. This is the first year we're going to do it virtually. It's always been a luncheon of some kind, so thank you for your patience as we worked through some of the cyber bugs that we all have to work through now and today. So our panelists today, I want to welcome them. We may have a couple other panelists join us as well, but I want to welcome, first of all, Senator for District 40, Senate Minority Whip Craig Brandt. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jerry. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Our state representative for District 23, Damon Eli. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And we have our newly appointed or newly awarded in the position of State Representative District 60, Joshua Hernandez. Thanks for jumping in the fire.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Jerry.
So, and then our partner today that'll be asking questions on behalf of the Observer today is Arjun. Arjun, thank you for joining us today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started and get moving on this. And the very first thing that I wanted to do is go around the horn and just hear from from Senator Brandt and our representatives on what's their thoughts on the upcoming session and what kind of bills do you think you'll be sponsoring or pushing through, since we are in such a interesting, dynamic pandemic year? So Senator Brandt, from the point of view of the Senate.
Thank you, Jerry, and I really appreciate being able to join everyone and speak to everyone as we get ready for this session. This has been one of the weirdest years that I have experienced. Get used to this that you're seeing right here, because this is the way a lot of the session is going to be done. Our committee meetings will be done on Zoom. Now, in the Senate side, we will be doing our floor sessions on the floor. We'll have some members that do it from their office, but most members will probably be on the floor. But so get used to seeing the screens if you want to follow what's going on. Jerry, I'll also be doing a weekly town hall meeting. I just started getting that information out there. If anyone wants to sign up for that, just email me at senate40@gmail.com and put your street address on that email, and I will get you signed up for those. We haven't set a date of the week yet, but I'll be doing those since you're not able to come up to me in Santa Fe. I'm going to set up electronically to come to you and to have an opportunity for you as constituents to be able to speak with me. So I'll be doing that. As far as bills go, we're really looking at, what kind of bills right off the bat in that first week of session, what kind of bills can we do to help businesses that have been negatively affected by the governor's orders. And so, businesses that have been shut down the entire time, businesses that had to be shut down part of the time, what businesses that have been affected the most by this pandemic. We're looking at our restaurants is one of the biggest industries that's been really affected by this. I will also be bringing the shooting threat bill again that I brought a couple of years ago. Still haven't figured out why that did not go through. But in our state, it is a felony to threaten to blow up a school building or any building. But if you threaten to take a gun into that building and shoot people, it's not a crime in our state. And so we need to fix that. And that's something that I've been working on for a couple of years. But we've had some hurdles on that no one really understands. So we're going to try to work on that again and get that fixed. So that's kind of some of the things I'll be working on. There's some other education issues. As you know, that's where one of my passions is. And then really, I'm not going to carry a whole lot because as the whip, I have a lot of other responsibilities within our caucus and just helping our other caucus members to be able to get their bills through and have a successful session.
Did it anyway, didn't I? Representative Eli, your thoughts on the session as well as any bills that you will be hearing.
Sure. And first, I want to welcome my new colleague to the House, Representative Hernandez. Nice to meet you on Zoom. So I will tell you, this has some. I'm the House Rules Chair, but this has some relationship to the events of yesterday. That I do think it's kind of all of our jobs as elected representatives and senators to try, as best we can, to kind of turn down the toxic relationship between the parties. I mean, and that relates to what I'm doing. I spent about, I'd say, an hour today with Representative Nybert, who's a Republican from Roswell. He and I have worked on, over the past 4 years, we've tried to work on at least one significant piece of legislation that would have bipartisan support in both chambers. So, for example, we carried the ethics bill in the House. So we're trying to do that this year with, of all things, the emergency declaration powers of the governor. Now, I want to be clear that I'm carrying that bill, but that I do think on the public health aspects of this, that the governor is doing a good job. I think a fair debate can be had about the economy, but on the public health, frankly, I don't think there's any debate that she's done a good job, because if nothing else, we are now one of 3 states that are kind of leading the way on vaccines in the country in terms of people being vaccinated. So we're running a much more efficient program. Having said that, I'm doing a bill that would amend the emergency declaration because I believe that the legislature wrote themselves out of the Emergency Declaration Act. And so for a point of principle that the legislature should have had a role in this and should have oversight, it's not the governor's fault, it's our fault for having passed a bill that did that back 17 years ago. That's the kind of bill that Republicans and Democrats can see eye to eye on for different reasons. But we can work together on those bills to kind of restore some balance to oversight. So Representative Nybert and I are working through that. We will have something hopefully pre-filed that I can show Senator Brandt and others. But the bottom line is I'm trying to work on that kind of bill that would help. I would say to you that one of the things that has really locked me down is I'm the chair of the House Rules Committee. And we are going to have on the House side an entirely virtual session. We have essentially the same size chamber, but with 70 members as opposed to 42. It's just much more dangerous to have a bunch of people on the floor. We had a modeling done by Los Alamos National Laboratories, and it is no exaggeration to say it would be incredibly dangerous. So we're going to end up, people can come to the floor if they want, but they're going to have to work through either Zoom or the telephone. Members will be able to work off of Zoom so that everybody's on the same platform. There are a number of other bills that I'll be carrying, but I'm limited to 5. So not as a rule, but as an informal, interestingly enough, it's going to affect the Democrats more than the Republicans historically, because Democrats just seem to run a lot of bills and Republicans are just much more smart about it and more focused. But it's not a rule, but it's an informal request by the speaker. So I will be doing things that are a little bit focused on trying to bridge the gap between Republicans and Democrats and turn down some of that toxic stuff. Having said that, I will run. I'm running like a bankruptcy bill that helps consumers out. I want to hear about Senator Brandt's gun threat bill. I must have heard that, but I would be interested in that. There's a lot of things I'll be helping members on, but as the rules chair, at least this time, it has been a nightmare in terms of getting the House rules together. I will tell all of you, I'm not particularly excited. I don't think any of us are about doing a virtual session. I am by nature an extrovert. I like seeing people. I think most politicians do. The public will be kept out of the building. Last year I ran the red flag bill, a very unpopular bill among a large segment of the population. I want those people that are against the bill to be right there in the committee yelling at me directly. That is their right. And the idea of keeping people outside of the building, I just hate it, but we can't do anything else. It's just too dangerous. So I'm happy to talk about other bills, but I thought that would kind of give you an overview, so I'm not talking too much. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Representative Eli. All right, so the newbie in the room, Representative Hernandez. So eyes wide open, ready to go, right?
Yep, drinking from a fire hose every day. So, hi, I'm Joshua Hernandez. Many of you probably know me. If you don't, I've been a resident of Rio Rancho for 10 plus years now. I was just elected in November to take over and fill the shoes of Tim Lewis. The upcoming session, I think, is going to be a very unique one. I've never participated in a regular type of session, although I get how it goes and I've been in the background. And it's a lot more for us as a rookie trying to learn the normal system and this new virtual system and try to keep everybody safe. So I'm really hoping that with the virtual session, like Representative Eli said, that we can really work across the aisle and lessen that divide between us, just to better the state and help us get out of this pandemic. So I'm super excited to take advantage or to take part in the upcoming session and represent the people of District 60 in Rio Rancho and Sandoval County. As a rookie, I don't get to pre-file bills, so I have a couple extra days to get all of my bills put together. One bill that I'm working on is a bill to waive governmental fees for businesses that have been severely limited or closed due to the pandemic, mostly going for restaurants who are still having to pay liquor license fees and other fees like that when they have no revenue coming in. And it's really just, to kind of help stop the bleeding. And then another one is to help retired veterans pensions, make them tax exempt, to help not only our veterans, but attract uniquely trained people to our workplace. Hopefully we can get some of those people to come in and grow our workforce. So those are really my main ones. I'm working on a couple others, but we can talk about those later. Thanks, Jerry.
Sir, and I understand that Senator Shindo is on audio only. Is he here? I don't hear him or see him, but I hear he's there somewhere. So hopefully he'll join us here in a minute. So with that, we have Arjun Duncan with us from the Observer, and she's got a few different questions for you all, and can rotate or pipe in on your thoughts on those questions, and I'll turn it over to Arjun. Thank you, Arjun.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask the questions. Feel free to just jump in and answer as you please. And if anybody hasn't answered, by the end of the rotation, then I'll call on them to make sure everybody can. So the first question is a two-parter. What can you or the legislature do to support people who have lost their jobs due to the pandemic? Also, what can the legislature do to develop the workforce for the future in relation to career technical education and or retraining workers for career changes to different industries?
Arjun, I think both of those are really important questions. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people have also lost their businesses. And I think what Josh was talking about with the bill to deal with some of those issues with our restaurants, every worker in those restaurants has lost their jobs. We can have a 2-day debate on whether or not the orders were right and the right way to go. But now we have to deal with the fallout, and that's the right thing for us to deal with at this time. And so how do we help those folks? I think the federal government has done some things when it comes to unemployment, but I would tell you not everyone qualified for unemployment that lost a job. I had a daughter-in-law who was actually getting ready to start a job. And the day that she was going to start her job was when the governor started all the lockdowns in March. And so she never got any unemployment. She never got any of those benefits. And it took just, almost 6 months for her to find something else because that job went away. And so, those are some of the things we have to, work on. Not everything can be done online. Not everything can be done, through the internet. Some jobs are, you still have to go out and work manually. And so, we have to figure out those supports. We've got to help where we can, but we need to support those who either, the training that they have, those career fields have changed. And so we need to help them get cross-trained into jobs that they can do right now and they can do from home. We may have to help with some of the technology that they may not have. I know you're going to ask a question about broadband, so I don't want to cover it here, but that's one of the issues that we have to deal with. And then you talked about career technical stuff. It's something that I was working on, 12 years ago when I was on the Rio Rancho School Board. I was trying to get career technical pushed because I was one of those people that when I graduated from high school, I didn't want to go to college right away. I wasn't ready to go to college right away. And thankfully, where I went to school, we had some career technical training, so I didn't have to go to college right away. When I went to college, I did very well, but it's because I had that gap and that time to take a break and mature. There are jobs right now in the electrical field, in the HVAC field, in the nursing field, and in all these fields where you do not have to get a 4-year degree and go into debt $100,000 to be able to get a good job that pay better than the job you're going to get by going to college for 4 years. And so we need to help young people who maybe education isn't their thing. Maybe they like to work with their hands. Maybe they like to build houses. Maybe they like to fix cars. We need to get them in those career fields where they can start off within 6 months to 18 months in a career that they can support a family. Those are the things that we need to do with career technical. Thank you.
I see Senator Shendo is here. Did you want to have him say a few words?
Yes, Senator Shindo, thank you for joining us. Yeah, thank you, Representative Eli, for mentioning that. Senator Shindo, do you kind of want to introduce yourself and talk about your initial thoughts on the session and any bills that you'll be covering before you, and then we'll throw you right into the answering that question.
No, thank you for the invitation, and good to see our colleagues on the Senate and on the House side. Welcome, Josh. No, I mean, I think, a lot of us are worried about how this session is going to pan out. I believe Representative Eli said he's an extrovert, and I think so am I. And I think, I'm really nervous about, what's going to happen and access and of course, having folks being able to be a part of the process. And I think in some extent, we had this discussion before, I think to some extent, with, the lack of broadband in some ways, more people will participate, but if you don't have adequate, connection, especially in rural areas, it might be a tough one and so forth. So, but we'll try to hopefully strike a balance. I think we're, at least on the Senate side, there's going to be some FaceTime for us and then committee meetings remotely, but still be, on the floor session, on the floor. And I told my Senate Majority Leader, I said, I'm pretty nervous because I don't have a whole lot of good connections sometimes in Jemez and where I'm at sometimes. And so I might just be in Santa Fe in the office. So if there's any technical issues, I have the tech support there to make sure that we can conduct our business and so forth. I haven't really haven't been working on any piece of legislation, per se. I've been asked to support, certain legislation, but I haven't really responded to, I haven't pre-filed anything. And just kind of looking at, what's out there and how much we can do. The issues that I worked on in the past, have been around environmental issues as it relates to, fracking and a lot of my constituents deal with that in the Northwest area. It's a delicate balance because I have tribes that also are oil and gas tribes, but I also have citizens that are impacted, through environmental and as well as, air qualities and so forth. So be looking at those kinds of pieces of legislation. The whole area around economic development and diversification, I think, is huge. Several years ago, we passed the ETA, and I think we also hopefully will try to provide resources to begin to develop jobs and opportunities in those areas or those geographic areas that will be significantly impacted by the conversion to renewable energy and trying to fulfill our portfolio standards as well. My colleague Senator Brandt touched on jobs with the career technical fields. I look back on my own history. I went to college and spent almost 20 years in higher education, here at Colorado and in California, Stanford, and back at UNM. And I can see the value of higher education, but at the same time, the value of technical field. I come from a family of 9. 8 of us have college degrees, and my youngest brother just had never interest. And when I look at the rural areas and what the needs are, we certainly are able to provide higher education opportunities for students. But at the same time, I think over the years, our education system has shied away from providing, these opportunities that used to be pretty prevalent in high school. And I don't know where we went wrong on that or why we shift that, that course of action so severely where now we don't even have those at all in our schools. And I think there's a huge need, particularly in rural areas. And I told somebody, I said, I'm done with higher ed. I think right now I want to take welding and small, machines, because I have farms and I have, things that I can't go down to the store, or around the corner in Jemez to take care of things. And so I think in the rural areas, there's a lot of need for that kind of development. Hopefully it will spur some economic development. So, and broadband's an issue. We have to solve that for statewide. And I think with this pandemic, the rural areas, not just Native communities, but all of rural area, I think the whole issue has just been exacerbated. Our children, particularly in the remote areas, can't even log on. I think we lost probably hundreds, of students that are not part of the schooling because of the lack of broadband. And I don't know how long this is going to last. And so I think, I know my colleague, Senator Padilla has been really pushing on the broadband for many years, and we will continue to support that effort to see what we can do to make that a reality for all of our, not only our school kids, but also when you think about, remote, jobs, people that are able to do things over the internet that I think it's possible today. That wasn't possible, just a few years back. And so how do we create those new jobs so that people can remain, in their communities, but still have a good quality of life and jobs that they can make a living. And so these are all the things that we're trying to address. I know it's a lot. It's complicated, particularly now with this whole COVID, pandemic. But hopefully we can do justice for our citizens as we try to work together to make sure that we solve these issues. And these are New Mexico issues. It's not, Republican issues, not Democratic issues. I really, excited about, the upcoming session. I think, we have a new leadership on both sides coming. and hopefully we can really rally together to do some really good things for the citizens of New Mexico. So that's it. Have a good night. I'm kidding.
Josh, you want to jump in or you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I just want to start with two quick things. One is, remarkably, we are going to have a flat budget. And I say remarkably because, just a few months ago, we were talking about 20% cuts across the board. And surrounding states are not going to be so lucky. There's going to be a lot of cuts in surrounding states, Arizona, Utah, but not here. And it kind of speaks to not so much my side as Republicans and Democrats together, making sure there was enough reserves to be able to survive this. And we had the largest reserves we ever had going into the pandemic. And so we're lucky to have a flat budget. Having said that, it means we don't have a lot of extra money out of the budget. And the other thing to remember is we have in our Constitution an anti-donation clause. So we can't be giving money away. But what we can do is, and what we did in the June session is, for the first time, we took money out of the Severance Tax Permanent Fund, which had $5 billion in it. You want to think of that money as off budget because they're permanent funds. There's two of them. And the Land Grant Permanent Fund is a whole different animal. But the Severance Tax Permanent Fund, we were able to take roughly $450 million out of that fund, using $400 million for small business loans at low interest with no collateral and no personal guarantee. And it was used, but not as much as we thought. So what happened was there's going to be about probably close to $350 million that's available to continue either the small business loan or do other things that might help business. And remember, as part of that small business loan, one of the things that we passed was that businesses would not be charged an extra rate as people went on unemployment. So just in the future, Representative Hernandez is talking about waiving fees for restaurants. That's a good idea. That is something that the legislature can do without violating the anti-donation clause, because we're not giving them anything. We're just not charging them anything when they're not making money. That makes eminent sense. But it also makes sense to try and use some of this money rather than just send it back to the State Investment Council, where it's going to end up in New York banks, to really be aggressive as both Republicans and Democrats to see if we can help jumpstart New Mexico's economy. And I think I want to be clear about something as an example that everybody's talking about and why we're all talking about broadband. And the reason we're talking about broadband is because think of it as like electricity. At this point, having quality internet, which is really what broadband is all about, has become a necessity. And, for rural and Native American, for pueblos and tribes, it is critical for emergency services, for education, for healthcare. But for all of us, it's critical for business development. If we have high-speed quality internet in New Mexico, this pandemic is going to turn out, I think, to be a game changer for New Mexico in a positive way long-term, because we have the ability to be able to attract people from these large cities that have no quality of life that'll come to New Mexico so long as they can reliably work remotely without missing a beat. I mean, I have in both my home and at work fiber optics. My daughter has been here from New York since June. I mean, she lives in a tiny little apartment. She gets paid. She has never missed a beat. I mean, they have that's a 200-person company that she works for. 3 of them are in New Mexico working as if they were in New York. Now, my daughter, unfortunately, isn't going to stay here despite our pleading, but a lot of people might. And if we can start to use the fact that we are a remote, spread out population could be a real strength for us if everybody's on the same page in terms of access to information. So I do think with the money that we have off budget, we need to get a little more creative. And one of the things that we're talking about is some kind of, equity investing in businesses that would provide a public good, where we can work in a public-private partnership for, say, clean water or broadband, something that would provide a public good, get a return on the investment so we don't violate the anti-donation clause, but start to create jobs. And so we just really all have to start getting creative. And I actually think this is the session that's gonna do it. I think the pandemic has kind of opened all our eyes that we can really get some stuff done. So we're gonna go through some dark times the next couple of months, but I think we're coming out of this, and New Mexico is gonna be roaring out of this. And when they do, we're gonna build jobs, I hope, finally. So I'm still optimistic, but I have to tell you, my family thinks too much so, but I am still optimistic. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Okay, well, I'm in the tough spot because Senator Brandt and Shendo and Representative Eli took all the good ideas. I personally think that one of the biggest things we need to do is to safely continue to open businesses. I mean, the people that have lost their jobs, we need to get them back to work. And I mean, the restaurant industry alone has lost, 30,000 plus jobs. And that's a lot of people. As Representative Eli said, we also need to keep working with the small businesses for loans. We got to keep the businesses, open as long as they can during this pandemic. For as long as I can remember, on the job training side, my parents always told me, you got to go to college, and it just wasn't for me until recently. And now I'm, working towards my degree at UNM. But I wish I would have been given the option to go to a trade school, which I think, as I've educated myself on them, are a fantastic choice. But also places and programs like CNM Workforce Training Center. I know a lot of people who have lost their jobs in industries that are just not going to come back anytime soon, and they're struggling. And CNM Workforce is somewhere that they can go and learn a whole new skill in a year or 2 years and be up and running and have a whole new career. And I think that we really need to take advantage of the programs that we have that are unique in our state. That's all I got. Thanks.
All right, is there anyone I can't see who's on and wants to answer?
Arjun,
Okay.
this is everyone here.
Okay, I see a couple people on the phone, but I don't know if that's a panelist or one of the chamber representatives or what. But okay, second question. How will you address New Mexico-based businesses that have closed temporarily, reduced occupancy, or lost significant revenue due to the pandemic?
Arjun, again, I think this is what Josh was just talking about, and that, what the main thing is, we've got to get these businesses back open. I've been on 2 meetings in the last 2 weeks with the Restaurant Association, and they are begging and pleading to let us open. We're one of only, I think, 3 states that is not allowing restaurants to be open in any capacity, with the exception of carryout. So our drive-throughs, which, if I remember correctly, last year drive-throughs were evil, and that was the worst food you could eat. But now, they're the only thing, and they're doing great. They're thriving in this market because it's the only place anyone can go out and eat. And so, I look at the per capita rate of cases and deaths, and even though we've been locked down as a state for 9-10 months now, our per capita rate is higher than almost anywhere else in the country. We're in the top 10 in states of cases and of deaths. And so what we're doing now is not working. We're harming businesses for what? Now, if it was working, I would be all for it. If it was working, I would be completely backing us, doing this, if we could say, oh, look, we're saving lives. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the per capita rate, we're not. And so the one thing that every business has told me is, please just let me open my doors. Let me conduct business. If we're not going to do that, then we're going to have to look at how do we reduce some regulations to allow them to function in this alternate universe that we live in, right? So, the restaurant industry, again, they're asking, and this is really interesting because 33 states, without having to go to the legislature, their liquor divisions were able to say, for this time being, under these emergency orders, we will let you do home delivery. But our state wouldn't. Not that they couldn't, they just wouldn't. So those are some simple things that we can do that other states have done. Colorado, our neighbor to the north, has done that, to where they can actually mix your cocktail, they put it in the cup, they put a lid on it, and with your tamales, or with your whatever, they can deliver your cocktail to your home, so you don't have to drive, and there's no risk of you driving drunk. They deliver it to your home, and you have everything there that you need. They were able to do that without having to go through the legislature, by just suspending a couple of regulations and making sure that things were followed correctly. But we can't seem to figure out how to do those kind of things here. So now we're going to have to go in and do those things as the legislature. And I'm really hoping that's one of the bills that we can work together on across the aisle to make sure that restaurants can have the ability to do that, because it really helps them financially to stay in business. Thank you.
All right, I'll take the next one just because Senator Brandt took every one of my talking points over here. I agree that we need to get businesses back open, and I love the idea of I love your alcohol delivery bill. A majority of other states have been able to do it, and it's something that really needs to be a priority just to help our restaurants continue.
Yeah, we're gonna have a little bit of a disagreement, only that I agree with that, but it's not a regulation. It is a bill. We're gonna need, the governor doesn't have the power to just waive that. We have a problem generally with our liquor licenses that we need to address. We've created a monopoly that is just not sustainable, and we got to get out of this. We actually had a bill in June on the House floor that would have addressed, not in total liquor license, but the very problem that Senator Brandt's talking about. And for a variety of reasons that are too long to go into, it was pulled. But it is a bill that's coming back, and I think will have bipartisan support. I got to tell you, I mean, the number one thing, and it's just something that has to be said, we don't have enough hospital beds in this state. And as the capacity goes down to where we're filling it up, we are going to face, if we're not careful, particularly if there's now a third surge, rationing of medical care. And that's why I think everybody needs to be so careful. If we can just convince everybody, a simple fix, wear a mask. If people would just wear masks when they go outside, we could reopen businesses. We really could. We know those work. They protect other people, and they protect the person that's wearing the mask. Yes, I mean, I've heard 100 times that the CDC and the National Health Institute and the World Health Organization didn't recommend masks in the beginning. Science, like anything else, is evolving. And as the science of this pandemic came out, it became crystal clear 8 months ago that we had to wear masks. And if people just get off this shtick of you don't have to wear a mask, that would really, more than anything else, would help businesses, because we get our rates down, we really would, and we wouldn't face the risk of filling up our hospitals and starting to ration medical care. I can't speak for the governor. I don't, that's part of the reason why I think we're all frustrated as legislators. We'd like to have more of an oversight role as to what's going on. But I suspect that what she and Secretary Scrace are worried about is we got pretty close about a month ago to rationing medical care. They're doing that now in California. That is not something you ever want in this state. I mean, it is terrifying. And I have to tell you, my dad and stepmother both have COVID. My dad is just out of the hospital, seems to be doing okay, but it is affecting people. Yes, old people and people with comorbidities, but I have a very close friend that is my age, 63 years old, in excellent health as a runner. And I'm telling you, this virus has laid him out. And so we need to take it seriously. And I think if we could all be responsible and do the simple chore of wearing masks, we can get everybody back in business. So I'm hoping this is a temporary deal and we get back to it and governor can start to reopen everything. Thanks.
Senator Shindo, any thoughts around this one?
Sorry, no, I think it's been covered. I mean, I think, just try and do the simple things. We can get past it. I know that in many of our tribal communities, we have multiple families living in housing shortages and so forth. So it's a whole nother issue that we're trying to deal with here in our communities. But I think, we're, for Jemez, we were doing very well from April all the way through almost all of September. We only had I think 19 positives, and then October just spiked up, and just the last month we've had, I think maybe three COVID-related deaths. It's still, relatively speaking, it's a low number. We're trying to do our best, but it's tough. We have lockdowns, curfew, but you can't control people's actions all the time. You can't, and so you just give them the information, hope they do the right thing, wear a mask, do all the things that we're asking folks to do. So, but yeah, it's a tough issue, but we all have to do our part. And hopefully, with the vaccinations happening, hopefully at some point, as more people get vaccinated, we'll see how that's playing out and so forth. So we're doing our best here in our community too. We have our own vaccination program that started 3 weeks ago. I think I just talked to the health director earlier. I think we've covered most of our elders, 85 and over, all of our frontline workers in the clinics, in the hospital, the dental, not a hospital, but our health center, nurses. So we're doing our part too. So hopefully we can get beyond this.
So if I can pipe in right now for the folks watching, if you have a question that you'd like to ask for the representatives or the senators, is you can put it in the Q&A box or the chat box, and then we'll get to those towards the end. So one thing I do want to throw at you is a bill that is dropping or is already dropped, and that is setting up LEDA to be used for retail Main Street business. Right now, it's not available to do that. There is a number of chambers in the state and EDDs that are in, and especially in the rural areas, they're looking for to use LEDA and the guidelines for LEDA for retail. Any thoughts on that one? I know that's throwing it out there. You probably haven't even seen it yet, but the interesting thought.
Yeah. I think Senator Brandt already voted for it. He's so good. He's so good and quick that he already voted for it and haven't introduced yet.
I think we've seen that bill, haven't we, Senator Shindo?
Yeah, I think so. And I think LEDA has done a good job. I know that we're trying to create what we try to say, economic development jobs that, I think our focus over the years has been on, those jobs that are high wage jobs and so forth. But, in rural areas and other places, it's just not the same. And so we keep developing jobs in the Rio Grande corridor. So if we don't change change the focus of that in a different way, the rural areas are going to continue to be left out. And so I think we've learned we've had experimented with that for enough years for us to figure out what things are working, and maybe we can tweak, the program in a way that all of us can benefit, not just the Rio Grande corridor where the jobs are being created.
Yeah, What Senator Shindo was talking about with LEDA money has been mostly used for economic-based jobs. Honestly, 8 years ago, if you'd asked me what an economic-based job was, I would not have been able to tell you. It's one of those things I've learned while I've been in the legislature, because I had also asked some of those same questions. I can't remember. I think I actually did vote for that. That's why we're kind of laughing. You know, I always had asked the question, well, why can't it be used to open a restaurant? Why can't it be used to open some small businesses in the more rural communities? You know, the problem with us keeping on and building more and more jobs in the metro area is that we just end up becoming more and more compacted. And one of the things I think we've learned from COVID, and maybe this is one of those places that me and Representative Eli can finally agree on something, is that one of the things we've learned is that we really shouldn't be so packed in, like sardines. And we've got a huge state and a beautiful state. We need to kind of spread out a little bit. Let's give some space between everybody and let people have their own space. We're not going to be able to do that if we keep just building businesses in Albuquerque and in the metro area. You know, we've seen some of that where we've are starting to see some infrastructure improvements in the Los Lunas area, and we're seeing some business come in down there. But still, we need to get further out into the rural communities, help them develop some jobs, help them develop some manufacturing, maybe some small manufacturing out there, work with the tribes. It's one of the things that I've tried to do. It's been a little bit difficult, but work with the tribes to try to say, how can we help you to start some small manufacturing on your tribe so we can get those jobs out there so they're not trying to drive into Albuquerque to work. That can help us in a ton of ways, even if you're not, as worried about environmental things. If you can cut out someone's commute and you take it to 5 minutes instead of an hour, and you've done a lot for the environment every day, right? And so those are some ways that we can really work together to get those jobs back into the rural communities, help those rural communities grow. I think one of the byproducts of COVID is you may see that happening. A lot more people are interested in moving back out to the rural areas. And so I'm hoping that that's one of the effects that we see.
Holy cow, Senator Brandt and I see eye to eye. Wow. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And to your question about using LEDA funds for restaurants, I just have to look at it, but that's not a dodge. I really want to be open to anything that we can do that's creative. And so that we go back, if it's LEDA funds or the Small Business Loan Act to expand that so more people can have it. But I totally agree. I mean, with Senator Brandt, one of the things that is attracting people to New Mexico now are these rural areas where they're not around people. It's remarkable. And if we can get them to where they can be out there in the middle of nowhere, and literally, and still feel like they're in an office in Los Angeles, we've gone a long way on improving economic development at the same time that we're doing the right thing by the rural communities and the Native American communities by giving them access to things that they need. So I can't improve on what Senator Brandt has to say, and you're never going to hear that from me again.
We got you recorded and quoted. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to agree with the other two guys. I can't add anything to that.
Okay, so Jerry, with 30 minutes left, did you want me to continue with my questions still? Okay. Third question is somewhat what you've already covered. What needs to be done to support the state's economy in the future?
I think one of the simplest answers is get out of our own way. We can't continue to just over-regulate everything. We've been working on that basically, in a bipartisan way. We've been trying to look at some ways that we can go through. We have regulations that have been on the books forever that make no sense. They haven't been looked at in a long time. We just need to continue to look at those, get rid of the ones that don't make sense. And we can't even enforce most of the ones that are there. So I think if we can get out of our own way, we can see some great benefits in our state and some great growth. economically in our state. And so to me, the biggest thing is just get rid of a lot of those regulations that we don't need. There are some that we need. I'm not a total anti-regulation person. There are regulations that are important to keep us safe and to protect us, and those need to stay in place. But there are a lot of regulations that just don't need to be there and just add to the cost of doing business. Another area that Damon, Eli, and I absolutely agree, Representative Eli, is on the liquor license issue. We have a huge mess in this state. You want to get more restaurants in this state? Let's make the liquor license laws in New Mexico like they are in every other state. Let's quit putting a cap on them to where only the richest people in our state can afford to get one. You know, and if you want to set up a cart that sells beer in Arizona, you pay $1,000 for that license, and you can do that. It's amazing. Not in New Mexico. If you want to sell liquor in New Mexico, you better find $1 million somewhere, because that's what it's going to cost you to do it. That's wrong. That doesn't help with economic development, and it doesn't help my community or Damon's community. Actually, all of us in the Sandoval County area. It doesn't help us. We can't hardly get restaurants out here because they can't survive without that liquor license. There's just no way to make it work. And so I think we can all agree on that. Maybe try to get that fixed for once.
You know, I want to say something kind of odd. Is that so? I was in a debate during the last campaign with my opponent, Ellis McMath. And so he talked about regulation. We got it. And I said, yeah, you don't have any. And he said, yeah, we do. We got too many licensing boards. They're all over the place. And guess what? I started looking at that, and to his credit, and we do. And so that's one place to start, where we can start looking at that on a bipartisan basis to set up. If we need boards for something, fine. But if we don't, we don't. And this idea of having, 1,000 different boards is just nutty. And so there are things we can do at a state level. And boy, I can't improve on the liquor license stuff. I will tell you, it's not directly related, but at some point I would think you would ask. I don't know how the other panelists feel, but I'm at a point where, and I have been for a long time, where other states are starting to legalize marijuana. And it's just time, guys. I mean, it just is. Arizona just did it by referendum. I'm not saying it as an economic development tool, but it is costing the state money when people violate probation and they're on, my wife's a retired judge. From day one, she's been on me to do something about legalizing marijuana, because we're spending a lot of money locking people up that they go across the border to Colorado and now to Arizona, and they can make money and they can buy it legally, and it's enough. And it's just another kind of thing that we could do to kind of stop, over-regulating, over-criminalizing things. But I do think on the regulation, my stock answer used to be what regulations? And I have to say to Ellis McMath, he was right about that. I told him. I think I'm wrong about that. There are things we can do, and I'm looking forward to working on that stuff. So thanks.
Benny, do you want to go? Maybe not. All right, I'll add a couple of things. I 100% agree with the regulations. I also think that we need to continue to look over our tax system to make us more competitive with other states. If you look at this one's not as easy, but if you look at the budgets of other states' economic development departments like Texas, North Carolina, I know they're much bigger, but they spend a little more than we do and attract a whole lot more businesses. And the other thing we need to focus on is growing our workforce. Most of our, my age and younger are leaving to Texas or Kentucky or the East Coast because, the grass is always greener. But we need to figure out how to keep our graduates here. We need to figure out how to keep our young people here and grow our workforce, where right now the people that are moving into our state are 55 and older. They still have good years ahead of them, but it's not a lifetime of work in our community. So I think that that's definitely another thing that we need to focus on.
Senator Shindo, would you like to say anything else about the economy?
You know, I think, you know, I think a lot of us have learned a lot. You know, this is my 9th year, and I think we, you know, when you become a senator or House member, you know, it's a learning curve. I mean, I think we've now have enough experience. Senator Brandt and I came the same time. I think we've all learned a lot, and I think we've seen, you know, our state in ways that we haven't, you know, from our daily lives and our work and so forth and all of that. I think now we're ready to really look at, you know, how can we do things a little differently? You know, what has worked, what's working in other places, and what are some of our best assets in the state, and how can we really begin to invest in those? You know, I think when we do business development, you know, attracting, you know, a large industry is one thing, but really all of us know that the backbone is really the small businesses, and how can we really, you know, invest in those to build our economy and create new opportunities for our young people. You know, I went to school in the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I go up there, you know, all the time, and it's just amazing growth. And it's too much growth, you know, in some ways. But, you know, you know, I think all of us have touched on, you know, what attracts us to New Mexico. It's the quality of life. And I think we have that as a huge asset. And how do we develop that so that those that want that kind of quality of life, we can attract and also to have our young people that, you know, that are born and raised here. You know, certainly I think some of us went away for a while, but this is always home. I mean, some of us will come back and some others will do other things, but how can we make it attractive? And it really has to do with our investment in our people, in our businesses to grow our own, in a sense.
Okay, fourth question. Virtual education has been a challenge for many students in New Mexico. What should be the state's priority in regard to pre-K through 12th grade education in this session?
So I seem to always be the first one jumping in. Does anyone else want to jump in first?
I mean, I can do it.
Josh, I nominate Josh.
I'll be the first one to say that education in our state is not my strong suit. It is so much bigger when I started diving into it than I could have ever imagined. But I think that that the state, I mean, that our priority needs to be to get our children back into the classroom. I know just from, you know, a lot of friends' kids, I don't have my own kids yet, but from a lot of our friends' kids that, you know, they're just not learning up to the same standard that they would be learning in a classroom. And, you know, we need to do that safely, which has to be priority number one. But, you know, in November, there was the report of 12,000 students missing from the schools across the state. I know some of those have come back, and some of those are for other reasons like homeschooling and moving and that kind of thing. But that number is alarming. You know, until then, we need to focus on making sure that the students have the technology that's required to be able to access their school, access to the internet, and the supplies they need in order to do that from home, which would include being able to, you know, pick up whatever they need from the schools or printouts or any of that kind of stuff. So my very limited knowledge, that's about all I got.
I'll go next. I mean, I guess there's a couple of things I'd say as we look back on it, not just as a state, but as a nation. Had we understood this pandemic at the very beginning as to how to handle this, you know, we talked a lot about business, but probably the number one thing we would have focused on keeping open our schools, because we see, you know, the dramatic impact that it's having. But that's not just a New Mexico problem. That's just been around the country. But I don't know that a lot of people in the legislature know this, but it's pretty clear to people that work in education is one of the things that I kind of part company on my colleagues on, a lot of my colleagues, is I am supportive of charter schools. And part of the reason that I am is because I do think, look, I don't think they're the panacea, but I do think they challenge a school's administration to be more creative about how to address educational needs and push people forward. And I do think that kind of competitive process is helpful in education. Having said that, we obviously have to be very careful that those schools are carefully monitored. So because we're stewards of taxpayer dollars, but I'm not opposed to them. And I do think that the more we can inject some note of urgency in education, the better off we're going to be, because obviously we're not doing a good job. I mean, we're 50th, it's just terrible. I do think that one final thought, and that is early childhood is likely to pass in both chambers. I actually look at the Rio Grande Foundation work, which is a conservative group, where they've talked about how early childhood doesn't help with cognitive development. By the time you get to third grade or whatever it is, that's gone away. That misses the point. They did this back in the 60s, where they actually did study in Michigan early childhood, and they've been able to look at those kids that got early childhood training over the next 50 years. And what they found was, it's not that early childhood education, if done correctly, improves cognitive ability. What it does instead is it improves those non-cognitive characteristics, like learning how to work well with others, learning how to accept failure, accept responsibility, the things we call character. And what they discovered is, if done well, what you're really doing with early childhood is you're not just teaching the child, you're teaching the parents as to how to raise their kids, people that really need that kind of training, and that those skills transferred to the kids and to the next generations. So the kids with quality early childhood, they don't necessarily do better grade-wise, but at least in Michigan, when the study was done, when they looked back, most of those kids, as a percentage, higher percentage of them went to colleges, a higher percentage of them stayed out of jail, a higher percentage had successful careers and successful marriages, and that those gains were passed to the next generation. So I do think early childhood is an important component of any education now, if done correctly. And I thought what the governor did on that a year ago was very smart, was to set up a department to make sure that when the money comes in from the permanent fund, again, this is all off budget, that when the money from the permanent fund comes in, assuming the voters pass the constitutional amendment, that it is spent on quality instruction. And that's the key, is that the people that instruct kids treat those kids like they're their own children. And if we do that, we can really change the state.
I've been a charter school advocate for a very long time. Many of you may or may not know, I started the first charter school in Jemez Pueblo back in 1999, when we first expanded the charter school to just 5. The Pueblo of Jemez was the only tribe that had a charter school that first year, and then others began, on year 2, and then subsequently we also started a high school here. And I think that competition, they're small, but they're very agile. The community, the board has a lot more flexibility. One of our K through 8 school is connected, is a district charter, and then the high school is a state charter, and so forth. So we have both dynamics working, and they're doing very well. I mean, on the K through 8, our TOA language is very important. And so language, cultural instruction is just as important. And our tribal council, about maybe 6-7 years ago, made our TOA language HexGuard as total immersion. And it's interesting because, I was born and raised speaking TOA as my first language. It wasn't until Head Start that I began to learn English and so forth. And so, but we've shifted over to, which is almost all English. And now we're going back because it's very interesting. And I had my own little longitudinal, unscientific study, but all of us that were original TOA speakers, we have a very large number that are also have advanced college degrees. But those kids that are speaking English as their only language are having difficulty. It's interesting. But I think we've known from studies as well that the more languages you speak, the better it is. And young people are able to acquire more. And so it's, we've gone from, totally tribal, our own language, to federal policies where they're trying to extinguish our languages, prevent us from doing it. Now we're going back to teaching it in our own Head Start. And it's amazing, and we also have teachers that are transitioning as they go from Head Start to first grade to make sure that these students are being helped as they begin to do more English and so forth. So, but we're kind of keeping track of that, and it's going to be fascinating. But I think if the more choice we had in schools, create more opportunities, and competition is always good. So I've been a charter school advocate since day one, and I think we're the only pueblo or a tribe that still has the only 2 charter schools on our reservation.
So the question was about, I think, about dealing with the online schooling since we've shut down school in New Mexico. So first of all, I really love someone to give me a legitimate answer as to why we shut down schooling in New Mexico. All the science, and I keep hearing about we need to follow the science, we need to follow the science. Well, Fauci has said from the beginning that the worst thing we can do for our children is shut down the schools. And all the science has shown that children are not susceptible to this illness. And unless they have some really bad pre-existing conditions, they hardly even get the virus, let alone we've had so few deaths, and any death in a child is a horrible thing. So we do need to make sure that we're doing it as safely as possible. When this first thing started, I talked to the public education department back in March, and they actually agreed with me. The only reason they were shutting down the schools was not to protect the kids. It was never the reason we were shutting down the schools. It was to protect the teachers and to protect the staff. And so, especially now that we have the vaccine, we should be putting our teachers and our school staff at the front of the line for that vaccine. And in 3 weeks, we could have all of them vaccinated twice and get our kids back in schools. And yet we're not doing it. We're already 50th in the nation, folks.
Thank you, Brent. We're doing it in Jemez because we can.
Good job, man. Good job. I really appreciate that you guys are doing it in Jemez.
Yeah, so
we are 50th in the nation.
Yep, but the teachers are our front line, and we're going to be vaccinating our teachers, I think, starting in about 2 weeks.
Good. But they should have been the first ones so we can get our kids back in school. We have how many lost generations is it going to take in New Mexico when it comes to education before we actually take education serious in New Mexico? We can talk about pre-K all we want. How do you do pre-K on the computer? I mean, it is not going to work. It is not working. What we are doing, we've lost a year of education that our taxpayers have paid for, and they've got nothing in return. And so we need to quit playing games. We need to get our kids back in the classroom because the online stuff isn't working. LFC has already done the study that showed that it did not work. It might be a smidget better. So instead of having the total year lost, we might have only had 7 months out of 9 months of instruction lost this year because they're going to get about 2 months worth of instruction online. And it's no fault of the teachers, they're doing what they're being told to do. So please don't take this as an attack on them. Our public education department is telling them they can't have school. They can't. And, I can't believe a court hasn't stepped in and said your Constitution requires that you give a sufficient education to these students. And now you're not even giving an education to these students. So, we need to quit playing games with education in this state. It's not about money, although money will help. It is about having some accountability, making sure we have the best teachers, making sure that our kids are getting what they need so that they can learn. And we've got to quit playing games. I really appreciate that Representative Eli and Senator Shindo are huge supporters of charter schools. But as you look at the numbers, that has not been enough in our state to bring us up. We're going to have to look at some other things. We're going to have to allow parents to have even greater choices when it comes to the education of their children. They are their children. They're not ours, they're theirs. And we need to allow them to have the choices that they need and that they need to make sure that their children have the education that they deserve. And I say this as someone who barely could read, almost got thrown out of the military because I could not read at a high enough level to stay in the military, had to get tutoring to stay in the military. I understand how important education is. And so that's a little bit of my high horses, why I did not want to go first. But at some point we've got to wake up in New Mexico and educate our children. Thank you.
Okay, this will be the last question for me, and it's technically about broadband, but we've already covered that in a number of questions. Do any of you have any other thoughts on broadband and policies and getting it here that you haven't already brought up?
No, just one thing that I just want to say as we're talking about charter school, having our charter schools independently, we were able to apply for the E-rate program through the feds. And so we got funded. And so right now we have faster speeds in our 2 charter schools in the Pueblo of Jemez than we have for our tribal operations. So I'm going to be moving my offices over to the charter school because it's amazing. And having the flexibility of the governing board and the charter school allowed us to be able to do that. And so it's amazing. Our community library and our 2 charter schools have the highest, speeds in this valley. But of course, it's limited to those kids that go to those schools. But just to let you know that it's possible.
Well, thank you, Arjun, and thank you, everyone, for all those excellent questions and responses. We do have a couple questions that popped up online. If anyone wants to just answer these real quickly. Can you comment on the revenue forecast for the coming year and any thoughts you have on how to reduce New Mexico's reliance on oil and gas as a revenue source? That's $1 million question, right?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure we need to reduce our reliance too much. We have a great resource in our state called oil and gas. We do a really good job of harvesting that resource. Understand that all of us that are on the internet right now are using oil and gas. Your computer would not exist without oil. It just wouldn't. You can't make the plastics that go into your computer without oil. So we have a huge reserve of oil in our state. I think we just need to make sure that we're consistently harvesting it safely and protecting our environment. I think we've done actually a really good job of that. We do a good job of that in our state. We don't want to make that so burdensome that we drive everyone out of Texas, because out of New Mexico into Texas, because the Permian Basin runs through our state and into Texas. And if we make it too difficult, they're just going to leave. And I will tell you, it's almost half of our budget. I don't know how. We just talked about education. We wouldn't be able to fund education without oil and gas. We can move into the clean energy all we want. I am not against clean energy. However, understand they don't pay taxes into our state's budget, for the energy that they're producing. So we've got all these windmills going up. We've got all these huge solar fields going in. They're not paying into the severance tax. They're not paying into the budget. They're not helping us keep the lights on in this state. They're not helping us keep the lights on in our schools. So unless we're going to start taxing them for that created energy, for that, it's mostly electricity. So unless we're going to start charging them for the created electricity, we're not going to be able to supplement or even supplant that oil and gas money. So I think we have to be careful that we're, saying, how do we get rid of the oil and gas? We can't in our state and survive financially, get rid of the oil and gas industry. So.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Someday we're going to run out of oil and gas. So we're going to have to figure this out. I mean, if we're relying on 50%, which we probably are at this point, on oil and gas, I tell people all the time, anti-fracking is fine, but what teachers are you going to lay off? But that doesn't mean we sit on our hands and do nothing. The fact is that as solar and wind become more and more economically viable, we can tax them. And we should be moving in that direction, not quickly, but soon. Because at some point we're going to have to replace the oil and gas. It's not going to be there forever, but solar and wind will be. And while I agree that we can't move too quickly because we'd have to start laying people off, we have to start moving in that direction. And so I do think we are obviously too dependent on oil and gas, and we've got to figure out a way to diversify our revenue coming in. And that's what this whole conversation has been about today. And I do think we're doing that. I always love what Joe Biden said about renewable energy and climate change. Is he said, when Donald Trump talks about climate change, he talks about a hoax. When I talk about climate change, I talk about jobs. And that's exactly right. And the state needs to get to a point where we understand oil and gas is a finite resource. We are going to run out of it. And so we can wait until the last possible minute before we figure that out, or we can do it right now. And so Representative Akil, who's now retired, started that process by talking about battery storage and taxing solar. It's a good idea. It's something we need to at least start to replace oil and gas revenue so that we're not caught on the short end of this as we start to see the end of fossil fuels. Thanks.
So the last question we have, if anyone wants to pipe in on this, and came from our LEDA discussion, but it looks to be, is there any bills or any anything that you plan on promoting that will support entrepreneurs or startups? Obviously, we're the pandemic, a lot of businesses have gone out of business. There's going to be a need for a number of startups. And is there anything the legislature can do to incentivize those?
I know that we have done a lot on startups, especially, and I'm trying to remember the program. I don't know if Representative Eli remembers them, but we have some startup funds for some of the technological programs that are being done, and very science-based projects around UNM. I can't remember exactly the incubator projects that we then take and have some startup funds to get them connected. Most of that's done through coordination with private industry, but we have put some state money into those. We're going to have to look at, and Representative Eli's right, we have this thing called the anti-donation clause. Sometimes we care what the Constitution says, sometimes we don't in the legislature as a whole. And so apparently this is one of the ones we really care about. And so we talk about it all the time. If it's such a huge issue, maybe it's time for a constitutional amendment to fix that issue and deal with, what are some areas where we can help businesses? What are some areas where we can help people, instead of us just always using it as the excuse for why we can't help businesses? I will say it doesn't seem to matter on almost anything else, but on this issue, it just seems to matter all the time. And I think we need to figure out a way to fix that. And that may be just one of the things we need to work on. Maybe, Representative Eli and I agree on that and work on that together this session to mend the anti-donation clause so we can start using it for small businesses. Because if we had the money to be able to say, you've got a good business plan, and we're going to have to figure out how we model that, how we put that together, that we're willing to, maybe we do like, they do with, the VA home loans, where you're helping, kind of an insurance thing to guarantee it for banks that want to invest in that business or help with that business. We can figure out some things that we can do in that respect.
Senator Brandt, what I will say about that is, as a chamber, that's what we hear more than anything else. Is that's the quick way to know is the anti-donation clause. So anything you and Representative Eli and all of you can do to get that altered and changed, it would make a huge impact on the state.
Well, we would have to do that by a constitutional amendment, but I am on board. In fact, we've talked about that. I don't know who's carrying it in the House, but it is something I'm definitely interested in. I think it is the legislative way of saying no, and I'm as tired of it as Senator Brandt is.
Okay, so with that, again, I want to thank you all for participating with us today on this valuable information here. Thank you so much for taking your time. I just want to throw it out there. Any other further thoughts or comments you'd like to make before we wrap up this evening?
Well, Jerry, there is a question over there on the pay scale for the teachers. I will say, we have increased the pay for teachers dramatically in this state. Now, some of the states around us have also increased their pay for teachers, but we have really increased the pay for teachers. We also have one of the best benefit packages for teachers of any state. Our retirement benefit, our health benefits, the benefits that we provide to our teachers are worth a lot more than if you take our pay and the benefits and you look at across the border at Texas's pay and benefits. You actually make more in our state. Just most people don't think about those long-term benefits when they're looking at where they're going to work, especially when they're starting off young. They don't think about retirement very well. And so we really have some great benefits here. Not that we don't need to continue to improve. The second answer to that, or second part of that, is that we have allowed the administration to grow to a point that's unsustainable in our state. Last year, we saw our first school district actually spend more money on administration than they did in the classroom. And that needs to change. That needs to stop. So we need to get back into some control over what's happening in the administration within our state, in the school districts, and figure out why that has exploded the way it has, and get that back under the control and get that money back into the classroom and into the teachers' pockets.
That's a great point, because on most of the federal programs that are out there, you only have so much you can spend on administration. Any other thoughts, comments before we wrap up? All right, once again, Representative Eli, Senator Brandt, Senator Shindo, and Representative Hernandez, I want to thank you guys so much for taking your time today. And for anyone that missed this, there's more opportunity to see it again. It will be on our website. With that, legislature starts very soon. There is the Rio Rancho Chamber is participating in what used to be as a legislative day in Santa Fe. They used to have that where there's a lot of booths in the whole 9 yards. It's virtual this year. We'll be doing it on Monday. Anybody that's watching with us right now, please, we'll be sending out information on that. It's no cost to participate. And there's a lot of things being covered on Monday. So with that, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you being here. Have a great day.